Does a mother of two have the right to play Russian roulette at 8,000 meters? Back in 1995, when the legendary Alison Hargreaves died on the savage slopes of K2, the world was divided. The press branded her as selfish, a mother who abandoned her family for a rush of adrenaline. But 24 years later, another killer mountain, Nanga Parbat, would claim her son, Tom Ballard, as well. It sounds like some kind of mystical family curse, but the reality was far more down to earth and far more brutal. So, what was it that truly drove them to the summit? And why did this love affair with the mountains end in a double tragedy? Let's find out. A 9-year-old girl stands alone on a Scottish mountain. 150 meters below, her parents, both mathematicians, are slowly making their way up. They can't see her, but she isn't crying. She's not calling for help. She's just waiting. With a total unshakable calm that's both terrifying and awe-inspiring. That little girl is Alison Hargreaves. And this day on Ben Nevis is just the first chapter of her incredible story. She grew up in Derbyshire, in a family where numbers and logic reigned supreme. Her parents were brilliant mathematicians. For them, vacation wasn't about lounging on a beach. It was about meticulously planned routes through the hills of England and Scotland. It was an intellectual's approach to the great outdoors. But Allison felt that something essential was missing from these hikes. She was missing altitude. Real altitude. The epiphany came when she was 13. Her school introduced a new activity, rock climbing. Her teacher, Hilary Boardman, introduced the teens to a world of vertical walls, handholds, and safety ropes. And for Allison, it was a revelation. She'd found a way to channel her inner energy, her hidden aggression, into something that didn't demand brute force, but rather intense focus and mental agility. She had found her own language, her way of communicating with the world. From that moment on, her life was never the same. By 14, she was obsessed. Every weekend, every holiday was spent searching for new rock faces to climb. She traveled all over Britain, honing her technique, building her strength. She would tell her friends the same thing, over and over. I'm desperate to be climbing all the time. This wasn't a hobby anymore. It was a need, as essential as breathing. Then she turned 18. She aced her exams. The doors to Oxford were wide open. It was her parents' dream, the logical next step for a family dynasty of intellectuals. But Allison wasn't looking at blueprints and formulas. She was looking up, toward the horizon, at a skyline broken only by the jagged peaks of mountains. And she made her choice. She turned down Oxford. She turned down a clear, prestigious career path. This was her first and most profound break with the world that had been built for her. She chose the unpredictable, dangerous vertical world of professional mountaineering. She made the break with her past, final, and absolute. Just after her 18th birthday, Allison packed her bags and left home. She moved in with a man who saw her passion not as rebellion, but as a true calling. His name was Jim Ballard. He was nearly twice her age, the owner of a small climbing gear shop, and a passionate climber himself, though not a professional. In this young, driven woman, Jim sees more than just talent. He sees a diamond in the rough, and he decides he's going to be the one to cut it. He becomes her everything, her partner, her coach, her manager, and the master strategist behind her career. Their relationship is more than just romance. It's a joint venture, with the future of world-class climbing hanging in the balance. Jim becomes the architect of her future. They even open a business together, an outdoor gear shop. But that's just the storefront. Because behind the counter, the real work is happening. While Allison is pushing her body to its absolute limit, Jim is focused on what we'd now call her personal brand. He's getting her name out there, lining up sponsors, mapping out expeditions. He's building the legend of Alison Hargreaves, while Allison herself forges the body needed to live up to it. Her workday doesn't start in an office. It begins on the hills of Derbyshire, at the crack of dawn, no matter the weather. Every single day. A grueling 2-hour trail run. This is more than just a workout. It's a form of meditation, a way to forge not just her muscles, but her mind. She is turning her body into a finely tuned instrument, one capable of withstanding the unimaginable stresses of extreme altitude, this monotonous daily grind. It's the price she pays for the privilege of seeing the world from a vantage point most of us can only dream of. Together, they're forging more than just a career. They're building a philosophy. Allison adopts a motto that will become her creed, her calling card. A line Jim would often repeat to capture her spirit. Better one day as a tiger than 1,000 as a sheep. And this wasn't just some nice-sounding phrase. It was the key to understanding everything she did. It was about rejecting the well-trodden path in exchange for a single, blindingly brilliant day at the summit of the world. And that philosophy, forged on the green hills of Derbyshire, was about to face its first true test, in the frozen heart of the world, the Himalayas. A tiger's life, after all, demands a worthy stage. And at 24, Allison gets an invitation that will change everything. She's invited to join an expedition led by Jeff Lowe, a living legend of American climbing. The objective, Kangtega, a peak in Nepal stretching to nearly 7,000 meters. This isn't some local training crag where you can fall, get caught by the rope, and just laugh it off. This is the major leagues, a place where a single mistake can cost you dearly. On the 1st of May, 1986, she finds herself at the foot of her greatest challenge yet. With her partner, Mark Twight, she begins the ascent of the Northwest Face. This is no mere slope. It's a vertical puzzle of brittle ice and rock as sharp as a razor's edge. Every handhold is a gamble. Every foot gained a battle against gravity and the bone-chilling cold. But they succeed. They carve out a bold new route where no one has ever climbed before. And in doing so, Alison Hargreaves becomes the first British woman to ever stand on that summit. Back home, the papers erupt with headlines. It's a triumph. But the story is far from over. Lowe and Twight, her now famous partners, set off to tackle another summit. Allison remains at base camp. You'd think the mission was accomplished, that she could return home a hero. But that same fire is still burning in her eyes. She has no intention of resting on her laurels. She sets her sights higher. Her new partner is a Scotsman, Sandy Allen, and their goal is insanely ambitious. The 8,000er, Lhotse Shar. This is a whole new level, a different altitude, a different set of rules. They climb to 6,500 meters. The air grows thin. Every single step demands a titanic effort, but the altitude isn't the main danger. The mountain begins to speak. A deep rumble. Avalanches breaking loose. Lhotse Shar is making it crystal clear. It's not letting them pass today. For the first time, Allison comes face to face with the absolute, relentless power of nature. A force you simply can't fight. It's her first brutal lesson in the death zone. Sometimes the only way to win is to know when to retreat, to live to fight another day. This experience forges her in a way no conquered summit ever could. The lesson of Lhotse becomes a turning point. She realized that mountains could be more than just a goal. They could also be a sanctuary. But behind the facade of this perfect athletic partnership, behind the sheen of victory, lies a very different reality. A reality captured on the pages of her private journal. In 1987, an entry appears that makes your heart stop. Jim unleashed his anger again, pushing me into the snow. The perfect picture begins to crack, exposing the complex, painful truth of their partnership, where support and control went hand in hand. And maybe that's why, just 1 year later, she makes the most audacious and provocative move of her career. She decides to climb the north face of the Eiger, alone, the legendary murder wall, a vertical labyrinth of ice and crumbling rock that had already claimed dozens of lives. But there's one detail that turns this from a bold move into something unthinkable. Allison is 6 months pregnant. She's attempting the ascent, carrying a new life inside her, balancing on a razor's edge with a heavy pack on her back. And an avalanche does hit her, not of snow, but of newsprint. The press erupts in outrage. Journalists accuse her of selfishness, of recklessness, of putting her own ambitions before the life of her unborn child. Her name is dragged through the mud on the front pages, transforming her from a hero into a reckless mother. But Allison, forged by the mountains, doesn't break. She gives a response that becomes legendary, a sharp, powerful line, full of dignity and strength. I was pregnant, not an invalid. Shortly after her descent, she gives birth to a son, Tom, a boy who had technically been on the murder wall before he was even born. It seemed she had conquered it all, the mountain, her critics, the prejudice. But the euphoria of defeating the rock and public opinion quickly dissolves when faced with the reality back home. A year later, A short, desperate entry appears in her journal that says more than all the newspaper articles put together. I have nowhere else to go. The hero who conquered the Eiger was now in a trap with no way out. And the trap she wrote about in her journal was about to snap shut. In the early 1990s, the world they had so carefully built comes crashing down around them. Jim's business, the gear shop that was the bedrock of their life and Allison's career, is crumbling to dust. The economic crisis spares no one, and soon they lose their home to debt. The walls that were meant to be their fortress suddenly belong to someone else. Their new address is an old, beat-up van. This cramped space is now home to a family with 2 young children. The greatest female climber of her generation trades a warm bedroom for a cold sleeping bag on wheels. The mountains, which had been her passion, her way of speaking to the world. Now, they're her only hope for survival. Their entire world shrinks to the size of that van, and the only window to the future is her climbing. It's a terrifying transformation. Her talent, her records, her name, that's the only liquid asset they have left. Her body, her will, her ability to endure the cold and the pain. That's their only currency now. Now, every climb isn't just an athletic challenge. It's an all-or-nothing bet. Jim becomes her manager again. But this time, he isn't just building a brand. He's trying to save his family from poverty. There's no more room for error. Backing down from a route on the expeditions of 94 or 95 isn't just a missed opportunity or a bitter failure. It's a financial catastrophe. It means the sponsorship money is wasted. And there won't be any more. It means the van might run out of fuel, and the kids might go without food. The mountain is no longer just a mountain. It becomes her employer, her creditor, and her judge, all rolled into one. And the price of failure is no longer measured in meters, but in the future of her family. And under this monstrous pressure, the most ambitious project of her life is born. In the summer of 1993, she throws down a challenge not just to a single mountain, but to the entire history of alpinism. She announces her plan to become the first person in the world to solo the 6 great north faces of the Alps in a single season. The Eiger, the Matterhorn, the Grandes Jorasses. These aren't just mountains, they're icons. Names that inspire awe in even the most seasoned climbers. She's going to conquer them all, one after another, in a blitz. Their old van becomes a mobile base camp. While Jim handles logistics and the kids, Allison gets to work. They drift from campsite to campsite at the foot of the giants of France, Switzerland, and Italy. One mountain range gives way to the next. One assault follows another. She climbs a face, descends. The family packs up and moves to the next one. And it all starts over again. It's a conveyor belt of risk, exhaustion, and unimaginable pressure. And she succeeds. Face after face, summit after summit. She completes all 6 routes. Her speed is staggering. If you add up all the time she spent physically on the rock and ice, it comes out to less than a day. Less than 24 hours of pure climbing to write her name into history. This isn't just mountaineering, it's athleticism of the highest order. But the world she so desperately wanted to impress gives her a cold reception, especially the French press. Journalists and experts begin to pick apart her climbs, putting them under a microscope. People start picking apart her choice of routes. They're saying the line she took up the Grandes Jorasses and her route on the Eiger. They were too easy for such a groundbreaking record. So instead of a thundering triumph, she gets a wave of bitter criticism. Her incredible achievement is completely dismissed, boiled down to an argument over technical details. And the most painful blow is yet to come. The book she writes about that insane summer, a hard day's summer, fails to find an audience. It doesn't sell. The money they were counting on, it never comes. The greatest feat in the history of alpinism doesn't solve their financial problems. The van is still their home, and Allison realizes that even conquering 6 giants isn't enough to buy her family a normal life. The cold shoulder from the climbing community and the empty bookstore shelves. It's a blow to her pride, but it doesn't break her spirit. The criticism, it's like fuel to her. She's hurt, she's angry, and she decides to answer back. Not with words in an interview, but with action. If the world doubts her strength, she'll show them a kind of power that's impossible to ignore or deny. She returns to the Alps that very same autumn, but this time, things will be different. The stakes are raised as high as they can go. She chooses the Grandes Jurasses again, the very mountain they criticized her for climbing. But this time, she isn't taking the easy way up. She chooses the Cross Spur, one of the most difficult and dangerous lines on the entire face. And she's going in November, in winter, when the mountain becomes a frozen hell, where every single foot is a battle for survival. This isn't a sporting event anymore. This is a direct, uncompromising answer to every single one of her critics. She knows that just climbing the route isn't enough. She needs proof. To eliminate any doubt, any accusation of cheating, her sponsors arrange for a photographer. A dedicated photographer tracks her progress up the face, capturing every move. Now, it's not just her family watching from the van. It's the lens of a camera, there to witness either her triumph or her failure. On November 10th, she begins her assault. The winter face is a completely different beast. The ice is brittle, the rock is glazed with verglas, and the temperatures are plummeting. But Allison moves with unbelievable speed and precision. She climbs the entire face in a single day. In conditions where most climbers wouldn't even dare to leave their tents, she pulls off a lightning-fast ascent. It's a display of absolute mastery, endurance, and an iron will. And this time, the world goes quiet. The critics fall silent. There are no more arguments about purity of style, no more questions about her skill. This climb becomes her coronation. No one dares to question her place at the very top of the mountaineering world. She's proven everything she needed to. But this triumph, just like the last one, doesn't bring in any money. It only brings her a name that everyone now knows. And that name, the one everyone now knows, is about to be heard from the highest stage on Earth. Now, her sights are set on the ultimate prize, the one every great mountaineer dreams of, Everest. In 1994, she heads to Nepal. Her goal, the top of the world. She's tackling the classic route from the south as part of a British expedition. And waiting for her at base camp? It's not just glory and sponsors, but her two young children, Tom and Kate. Her 6-year-old son, playing with his toy cars in the shadow of the world's highest peak, while his mother prepares for the summit push. That image says more than words ever could about what's on the line for her. She climbs with confidence, her acclimatization going smoothly. Step by step, she pushes higher, navigating the treacherous Khumbu icefall, scaling the icy face of Lhotse. She reaches the South Col, the final staging post before the summit push, Camp 4, at an altitude of 8,400 meters. Just 450 vertical meters left to the top. Victory is so close, she can almost taste it. The air is frigid, thin. Every breath is a struggle, but she feels strong, ready for that final push. And then, her body sounds an alarm. It starts with a slight tingling in her fingers. That tingling deepens into numbness. She's losing all feeling in the tips of her fingers and toes. With her experience, Allison knows instantly what this means. This isn't just the cold. It's the first sign of severe frostbite. The precursor to necrosis, when your own tissue begins to die. The summit is beckoning just a few hours away. But a voice of reason, as cold and clear as the Himalayan wind, cuts through the ambition. She makes the hardest decision of her career. She turns back. With the summit within arm's reach, with every fiber of her being screaming, "Go on," she says no. This decision isn't an act of weakness. It's the ultimate display of professionalism. She would later explain her choice with disarming simplicity. "I felt great, but I wasn't prepared to lose my fingers." She chooses her future. She chooses the chance to hug her children again, rather than paying a price for the summit that would end her career. She descends, back down to her son and his toy cars, proving that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to retreat. But to retreat is not to surrender. For Allison, it means to regroup and to come back twice as strong. In the spring of 1995, she returns. But this is a different Allison, with a very different plan. This time, she approaches Everest not from the south, but from the north, the Tibetan side. And she's changing the game completely. She's giving up supplemental oxygen, no help from Sherpas above base camp. She is going for the summit in the purest, most uncompromising, and most dangerous style there is. This isn't just a climb, it's a philosophical statement. Her entire world, a tent, a sleeping bag, a stove, now fits into the pack on her back. She is her own porter, her own cook, her own one-woman rescue team. She alone establishes her high-altitude camps in the icy emptiness, a place where one wrong move could be her last. Her commitment to this principle is absolute. To preserve the purity of her style, to maintain that unsupported status, she even refuses a simple cup of hot tea offered by climbers from other expeditions in their tents. She's completely on her own, one woman against the greatest mountain on the planet. The journey is a slow, grueling battle against the altitude and the solitude. Every camp is a tiny island of life in a dead world. Every step upward is a victory over her own body, a body that's begging her to stop, but she keeps going. And then, on May 13th, 1995, she takes that final step. She's standing on top of the world, alone, in a silence broken only by the whistling wind. She is the first woman in history to make this ascent, solo and without supplemental oxygen. It's an absolute triumph, a moment that will forever etch her name in the history books. And in that moment, at the highest point on Earth, she picks up her radio. Her first words aren't for the world, not for her sponsors, not for the journalists. They travel thousands of miles to a small van where they are waiting. She says, "To Tom and Kate, I'm on the top of the world, and I love them very much. Over." The world applauds. Alison Hargreaves is the queen of the Himalayas, a heroine who achieved the impossible. But she doesn't even have time to bask in the glory. Her plan is epic. After Everest, she'll climb two of the planet's other highest peaks, K2 and Kangchenjunga. Straight from Nepal, she flies to Pakistan, to the foot of the Savage Mountain, the wild and unpredictable K2. But K2 greets her with icy indifference. The 1995 season turns out to be exceptionally bad. The mountain seems to wrap itself in an impenetrable shroud of deep snow and relentless storms. Weeks turn into months of agonizing waiting at base camp. June, July. The weather offers no window, not a single chance to climb. Tensions in the camp are running high. The climbers, full of energy and ambition, are trapped in a prison of snow. And then, what so often happens in the mountains, happens. Partnerships begin to fracture. Her climbing partner, the one she'd planned the summit push with, can't take the waiting anymore. He heads up with another team, catching a brief weather window. Allison is alone again. Alone, surrounded by dozens of people, but without a partner she can truly trust. Time is ticking by. By early August, most of the other expeditions have lost their patience. They pack up their camps and leave, admitting defeat. Base camp grows quiet. Only the most stubborn, the most obsessed, remain. And in this oppressive silence, Allison has her most difficult conversation. With herself. The pages of her diary fill with lines of pain and doubt. She writes that she feels like she's being torn apart. On one side, there's the obsession with this unyielding mountain, the desire to see this through to the end. On the other, an unbearable longing for her children, for Tom and Kate, waiting for her so far away. The mountain demands all of her focus, but her heart is pulling her home. And then, at some point, something inside her shifts, something changes. She makes a decision. She talks to some of the remaining climbers, a Spanish team, and tells them that after K2, she's done. No Kangchenjunga, no more records. She's going home. Not to another mountain, but to a beach. To build sandcastles with her kids. The dream of a beach has become more important to her than the world's third highest peak. But first, she has to finish what she started here. First, she had to summit K2. And it's as if the mountain itself, hearing her promise, gives them a chance. One last chance. The few climbers left at the camp, individuals from all over the world, the most stubborn ones, decide to team up. A makeshift alliance is formed, a kind of world team united by desperate hope. Among them is an American, Rob Slater. He has no experience on 8,000ers, but he possesses a fanatical resolve. He utters a phrase that sends a chill down your spine. Summit or death. Either way, I win. His words capture the very essence of this final push. Besides Allison and Slater, the group includes New Zealanders from Peter Hillary's team. Yes, the son of the legendary man who first summited Everest, and a strong team of 4 from Spain. This isn't a team of friends. They're allies of convenience, united by a single goal, to succeed before the mountain shuts down for the winter. And so, on August 12th, They make their way up to the final high camp, Camp 4, perched on the icy shoulder of K2 at an altitude of nearly 8,000 meters. The evening before the summit push, something incredible happens. After months of storms and blizzards, an absolute ringing stillness descends. The sky is crystal clear, the stars look enormous, close enough to touch. There isn't a single cloud, not the slightest breath of wind. The mountain has gone completely still. This perfect weather feels like a gift, a blessing, but in reality, it's a trap, an illusion of safety that lulls them into a false sense of security. Inside their tents, breathing the thin air, the climbers finalize their plans. They agree on a departure time. Everyone will move out together, after midnight, to give them enough time to summit and get back down in the daylight. There's a sense of cautious optimism. It feels like their patience has been rewarded. It feels like the mountain has finally decided to let them pass. They prep their gear, melt snow for water, and try to force down some food. Each person is lost in their own thoughts, but they're all united by one feeling. The summit is closer than it's ever been. All that's left is the final push. The night of August 13th. The group sets out from Camp 4. The progress is slow, agonizing. Every single step at this altitude is a battle. The Spanish team leaves first, around 1 a.m. The rest follow, and the perfect weather from the evening before is starting to show its first cracks. By midday, as the climbers navigate the most treacherous part of the route, the ice couloir known as the bottleneck, Peter Hillary looks up. He sees something that makes his heart stop. Above the summit of K2, clouds are starting to form. Not just any clouds, but lenticular clouds creating an ominous cap over the peak. For Hillary, who grew up in the shadow of the Great Mountains, the sign is unmistakable. It's the harbinger of a hurricane-force storm. The mountain is done waiting. It's getting ready to strike. He makes the hardest decision, but the only right one. He turns back. His survival instinct, honed by years in the Himalayas, is screaming at him to get away. Now. On his way down, he runs into the others still pushing for the summit. He sees Allison. Her eyes are blazing with a strange, feverish intensity. Hillary tries to speak to her, to point at the sky, at those treacherous clouds. But it's like she can't even hear him. He would later describe her state with a single word: obsessed. She looks right past him, upward, toward the summit, so tantalizingly close. And to all his warnings, she has just one short, firm reply: "I'm going up." In that moment, the split becomes final. Hillary and 2 other climbers head back down, saving their own lives. But the other 6, Allison, an American named Rob Slater, Bruce Grant from New Zealand, and 3 climbers from Spain, they keep going, walking straight into a trap. They cross an invisible line, the point of no return. They push on toward the summit, completely unaware that the icy hammer of a hurricane is already poised above them, about to strike with an inhuman fury. They're climbing toward their dream, a dream that has already become a deadly illusion. They keep climbing, but time, their greatest enemy, is working against them. The deep, loose snow makes every single step an agonizing effort. Their pace slows to a crawl. In mountaineering, there's a golden rule: the turnaround time. On K2, that's usually 2 in the afternoon. If you haven't reached the summit by then, you have to turn back. Otherwise, you risk not making it down before nightfall. They break that rule. Fatally, they reach the summit of K2 at around 7 in the evening. The sun is already sinking toward the horizon, painting the icy peaks a deep crimson. Allison and a Spanish climber, Javier Olivar, are standing on the second highest point on the planet. Over the radio, Olivar sends one last message down to base camp. His voice is tired but calm. He says the weather is perfect, no wind, but it's incredibly cold. They're starting the descent. Immediately. Those are the last words anyone will ever hear from them. About an hour after that radio call, the mountain strikes. Instantly, without warning. From the north, out of China, a dry, bone-chilling wind descends. This isn't just a storm, it's a hurricane. Winds are gusting over 160 kilometers an hour. That's enough force to knock a truck off the road. With the wind chill, the temperature plummets to a point where life can be extinguished in an instant. The hurricane catches all 6 of them on the most exposed, vulnerable part of the mountain, the summit ridge. Up here, there's nowhere to hide. not a single rock, not one crevasse to offer any kind of shelter. They're caught in the epicenter of a raging tempest at over 8,500 meters. Their small, fragile tents at Camp 4 are an eternity away. They are completely defenseless against the fury of a nature they chose to ignore. The trap has snapped shut. Meanwhile, far below at Camp 2, the two Spanish climbers who turned back earlier are fighting their own battle for survival. All through the night, on the verge of frostbite, they use their bare hands to hold their tent together from the inside as the hurricane winds try to rip it to shreds and hurl them into the abyss. They survive. And at dawn, on August 14th, as the storm finally begins to ease, they start their descent, with no idea what has happened to their friends up above. And it is they who are destined to be the first to witness the disaster. One of them, Lorenzo Ortiz, makes his way down the slope and stumbles upon a series of horrifying discoveries. Scattered across the pristine white snow are their belongings. He spots a purple anorak with that familiar floral pattern, a climbing boot, a harness. He knows them instantly. They're Allison's. The jacket is stained with something dark, like dried droplets. Ortiz looks up. On the snowy slope above him, he sees 3 parallel grooves leading down into the abyss. The marks of a fall. The way her gear is scattered so far apart tells him one thing. It was all torn from her body during a long, tumbling fall from over a kilometer up. The wind was so powerful, it literally stripped her in midair. In a state of shock and utter exhaustion, Ortiz keeps moving down. And then, he freezes. Far below, near Camp 3, he spots an unmoving figure on the snow. It's dressed in a red jumpsuit, Allison's colors. He can't get any closer. He just doesn't have the strength. He can only stare at that small, bright spot against the endless white. None of the 6 who reached the summit returned. They all remained on the mountain. Beyond that single distant sighting, no other trace of them was ever found. The killer mountain had claimed them, leaving only a few personal items on its slopes, a silent testament to the tragedy. The story of Alison Hargreaves, the greatest female climber of her time, ended where it was always meant to end, at the top of the world, in the embrace of the mountain she so desperately loved. News of the tragedy on K2 reaches Britain, and something strange and terrible begins to happen. The hero of Everest, who was being celebrated just months before, is suddenly the one on trial. The ink is barely dry on her obituaries when the tone of the press changes, becoming acidic, condemnatory. A posthumous trial begins, and its central question is splashed across the front pages of the Times and the Guardian. Does a mother of 2 young children have the right to risk her life like that? And this trial has its prosecutors. The renowned journalist Nigella Lawson writes a scathing article, calling Hargreaves' behavior unbecoming and accusing her of an egoism that denies reality. Another, Polly Toynbee, goes even further, labeling her an unfit mother. Allison is transformed into a symbol of irresponsibility, a woman who traded her children for adrenaline and fame. And in this chorus of condemnation, almost no one asks one simple yet uncomfortable question. There were men who remained on that mountain with Allison, fathers, husbands. They had families too, children waiting for them. But no one called them bad fathers. No one accused them of abandoning their families. Society judged her by a completely different, double standard, forgiving men for the very thing it would never forgive a woman. But the real truth remains hidden behind the loud headlines. Only later, when journalists begin to dig deeper, will the true story behind this desperate risk come to light. The story of her bankruptcy would emerge, the debts, the fact she was living in a van. It would become clear that her final climbs were about more than just ambition. It was a desperate kind of business plan. The currency, her own life, the stakes, her children's future. Behind the bad mother label was a woman backed into a corner, for whom the mountains were the only way to provide for her family. But the story doesn't end there. It goes quiet for 2 decades, and then takes a chilling, mirror image twist. The little boy who played with toy cars at Everest Base Camp, Tom Ballard, grows up, and he chooses the same path. The mountains that took his mother from him become his passion, his life. He becomes one of the most talented climbers of his generation. In 2015, he does something that stuns the entire climbing world. He repeats his mother's feat, climbing the 6 great north faces of the Alps, solo. But he goes even further. He does it in winter. This incredible, almost superhuman achievement he dedicates to her. The son, completing his mother's work, surpassing her, paying tribute to her legacy. It seems he found his own way to talk to her, in the only language they both understood, the language of the mountains. But the mountains, they know how to wait. In the winter of 2019, a 30-year-old Tom heads to Pakistan, to the same mountain range where his mother was lost. His goal, Nanga Parbat, another one of the killer mountains. He's attempting a new, unclimbed route, the legendary Mummery Spur, alongside his Italian partner, Daniele Nardi. On February 24, 2019, all contact is lost. A long, agonizing rescue operation begins. The whole world watches, holding its breath. But there is no miracle. A few days later, their bodies are spotted through a powerful telescope, 2 tiny dots on a snow-covered slope. They would remain there forever, on the mountain. The story comes full circle. Alison Hargreaves was gone at 33. Her son, Tom Ballard, was gone at 30. Both were left in the icy embrace of Pakistan's 8,000ers. This isn't just a tragic coincidence. It's a fatal legacy, a story of love and obsession, passed down from mother to son, that led them both to the same place, to eternity, at the top of the world. So, what do you think about this story? How do you feel about Alison Hargreaves and her choice to provide for her family by taking on such dangerous climbs?